All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today, I have Chief Manoushagian from Lake Worth PD in Texas, 22 years experience in law enforcement. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
You bet. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. You have some really interesting insights on leadership and wellness, so I'm excited to share those with our listeners. Give us a little bit of background into you first. Who are you and what has your career looked like so far?
Sure. So the first job that I ever had was working for a police department as a dispatcher. Graduated high school at 17. By 18, I was working at the police department. And it didn't take very long for me to realize that this is what I was put on the planet to do. So after a year of dispatching, and still a few years between then and the time that I could become a police officer, I decided to enlist in the Navy, served for 5 years as a military policeman in the Navy, and then got out and have been in civilian policing ever since.
I love it. Do you think that starting that young and starting in a different role, it gave you a different perspective on the career, but also the different roles within the organization?
I think so. Positive and negative. As an 18-year-old, you don't necessarily have the most experience and perspective on life, on people, on work. And so I think that there was a certain level of naiveness that I approached it with. It seemed really fun and there's all this energy around the officers and the work that they're doing, and they seem to be having a really great time. And so I think I approached it at first, at least, with these rose-colored glasses, like not knowing, the darker side of the profession. So it was good in that sense because I approached it with, vigor and energy. But also later on, as I began to understand a little bit more about what it had to offer and kind of the light that it showed on the darkness of society, that's where I was a little caught off guard and unprepared for that, and kind of had to learn over time how to make sense of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've heard that a few times where a lot of people are like, yeah, maybe I didn't really understand the realities of this career until I was already kind of in it and had to learn boots on the ground what to do. Do you think that there's anything that can be done earlier in the career to better prepare for the realities? Or do you think that it is kind of just the nature of it where you don't know until you know?
I think as police leaders, we have a fundamental responsibility to tell the truth. And obviously we often think of that in terms of like our testimony on the stand. Like, of course, we're going to tell the truth, and our word is really gold in this profession. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being truthful about the realities of the job to those that are just coming in it, those are mid-career, those who are reaching the end. And if you've been around any length of time, you have a better understanding of the realities than somebody who's just coming in. And shame on us if we know those things, if we have insight and we don't share it with those coming in. And I would never advocate for doing it in a way that would deter someone from coming into the profession. But I also want them and their family to be coming in with a full awareness of what they're going to be coming into. Me, for example, I was raised in a very structured, vanilla home. I had a present father. Everybody loved everybody. No ripples, no real hardships. And I would go as far as to say, like, I didn't have darkness in my life. I didn't even know what that looked like. And so when you step into the profession and then you begin to get exposed to these things that are reality for a lot of people in a lot of communities, but it wasn't my reality, there's a shock factor that comes with that. And once you get over the shock, you realize it's an honor. It's a privilege to be able to be the person that steps into that darkness to help people. But I was unprepared. And I think that had there been some leaders who took a moment or two to share with me, like, hey, we know where you come from and, know how you were raised. We understand what your belief system is like, but you are going to be exposed to things that you can't even fathom. And when you are, this is what you need to do. And we're here for you if you have questions about how to make sense of it all.
Yeah. The comment that you made, I don't know why it really hit me. It felt really emotional for me when you said that it was an honor to be able to step into someone's darkness. And in my mind, it was showing them the light, showing them that there is light at the end, because I think that there's so many people in the world that can't see any glimmer of hope. And if you can be that person that steps in to give them even a little bit of dignity, respect, hope, maybe that's the one thing that they need to get out of a hard situation that they're in. And so that made me really emotional. And I think that everyone I've talked to in this career wants to be that, wants to be someone that can help other people. And I really appreciate you saying that, because I thought that was a really good reminder, maybe to anyone who's listening, that you have that ability to do that for people. But I also appreciate you saying setting realistic expectations. I'm a really big fan of that. I think there's no one that I've personally met that doesn't want that, that's like, yeah, I just want to walk into a situation without any realistic expectations. I just want to walk in and feel blindsided by whatever's going on. And so, as an organization, as a leader, setting realistic expectations, but then taking it a step further and offering education and tools and support to be able to get through those hard times. And I like that you said you're not trying to deter, because sometimes it can feel like that, maybe this scare tactic, and if you're just yeah, this is what's going to happen, kid, and it's really hard, but there's not the follow-up of but we've got your back, and you can get through this, and we're going to help you to get through this with the tools and resources that are going to help you to succeed. I think that follow-up is really necessary. So thank you.
I saw a really awesome video yesterday of a sheriff's deputy who had made a traffic stop, and the woman that he had pulled over was just being ugly, aggressive, demeaning towards him. And he just had the ultimate calm. And he was like, listen, it's very clear you are not having a good day, but I'm not here to make it any worse. So I'm going to give you a warning, just really trying to diffuse the situation, and even acknowledging what she was giving him was far and above what was normal. And make a long story short, at the end, he asked her, do you need a hug? Just seeing that she was emotionally zapped. And the law enforcement side would say stoic, professional, no emotion, give the citation, give the warning, get back to your car, whatever she's feeling, that's for her. But he didn't do that. He recognized that what she needed had nothing to do with his badge or his uniform. It had everything to do with him as a human being. Wow. And so he said, do you need a hug? And she immediately said, yes, I do. And so he said, come on, get out. And they stood there and they hugged, for a period of time. And that's the part of the job that we need to make sure that our officers, our supervisors, our leaders, number one, that they're communicating that that's okay, that you don't have to be a stoic. You can feel, and you should, because that's the thing that's going to connect you to the people that you're policing among. And I just think that was the piece that was missing. And when we talk about, stepping into that darkness and being the light, well, what does that mean? How do you do that? It's just us. So what can I do for you to help you through this moment? And that's what I mean when I say it's an honor to step into those moments. The officer could have walked back to his car, but he took advantage of that and held that honor in the highest regard and ensured that she left better than when they first came into contact with each other.
I love that. I really think that at our core, we all want to feel like we're seen and we're important. And I think that we've lost a little bit of that connection just over time, just as humans. Take all of the career out of it, but as humans, I think that we feel really disconnected. And I saw something too on video that it was this science that was supported by science. And they said that it takes 13 minutes, just 13 minutes of connecting with someone to be able to change their life or to change that particular situation. And so it kind of goes back to what you said, maybe that interaction that officer, that sheriff, was a sheriff? You said deputy?
I believe it was a sheriff's deputy.
Had with that particular person, maybe it was that time that they needed, that connection that they needed. And so I thought that was an interesting data point. It said 13 minutes could change or save someone's life.
I would be interested to know across the country what the average length of a traffic stop is, because I would guess off the cuff around 13 minutes.
Wow.
And so what if we treated every one of those as an opportunity to have a meaningful connection with somebody?
Yeah. Wow. I got chills from that. One of the things that you talked to me about was, kind of the trajectory of your career and some pivotal moments that you had that kind of helped set your trajectory into what you're doing now. And one of the things that you shared with me was a story about Pepper. Can you share a little bit more about Pepper?
Yeah. So for the early part of my career, I was a canine handler. I handled 3 dogs. Pepper was my second dog. And, being a canine handler was my dream. That's what I'd always wanted to do. And, feel like a lot of officers worked really hard to get that opportunity and to be in a position to do that. So every day I went to work was like a dream come true. Couldn't have been happier with what I was doing. Pepper was, that on steroids. He was, the first dog that I ever trained from scratch. So at this point I had been promoted. The department sent me to trainer school. And so I was able to spend a lot of time with him and bringing him up from being very green and knowing nothing to being a full-fledged, patrol dog. January 28th of 2015, so a little over 10 years ago, Pepper and I got called to do a track on a suspect that had brandished a weapon at officers and then led them on, a long pursuit and had bailed out and run off in the woods. So me, Pepper, another deputy, and 3 state troopers all set off on this track and ultimately located the suspect, who was covered up completely in leaves. And so I made the decision to send Pepper to bite him. And we were fresh out of training. We'd only been home about 7 weeks. So this was going to be his first real street bite. But the suspect sat up and we didn't know that he was armed, other than, he had brandished a weapon at officers, but he was completely concealed. We couldn't see his arms or anything. He sat up and shot Pepper twice. He was lying in wait. He wanted to ambush officers. He had made statements about, not going back to prison. And so Pepper died instantly right there. But the suspect's intent was to kill one of us, but he had to get through Pepper first. And Pepper bought the rest of us enough time to return fire and shoot and kill the suspect. So Pepper's sacrifice ensured that we all went home. And when we had the memorial service, that it mimicked what we would do for an officer, I had the opportunity to get up and speak to officers, administrators, elected officials, members of the community. And I knew that I needed to treat that opportunity carefully. I wanted to be very intentional about the words that I chose and how I represented Pepper's sacrifice. And I knew that some people would view him just as a dog. And so I tried to flip the script and tell the story as if one of us had been taken. So were it not for Pepper, this could have been the story. And I talked about one of the troopers who was recently married. And if it wasn't for Pepper, the story would have been newlywed trooper tragically taken in shooting. The deputy that was supporting me was a brand new grandfather. He had 2 daughters. One of them had just had a baby. So the story would have read grandpa, taken, from family in line of duty, death, shooting or whatever. And so just really tried to highlight and bring attention to Pepper's sacrifice. But that was also a moment for me to reflect. If that was my day, if it were not for Pepper and my number got called that day, what would that be for my family? And I think anyone who's had a near-death experience would say that changes your outlook on a lot of things. It brings your priorities into focus. And, so for me, I ended up getting a 3rd dog, and then not too long after that, promoting out of the unit. And that's kind of what put me on a trajectory to, leadership. But it did bring all of those priorities into focus and to say, there's only so many times that you can narrowly escape death, before it eventually catches up to you. And, where does my family stack up in this priority list? Where does the relationship with my spouse fit in here? And so just, it was an opportunity to reorganize and reorient myself to what was important and what I wanted life to look like when I'm laying on my deathbed and looking back. What do I want that to look like?
Thank you for honoring Pepper and talking about the sacrifice that Pepper made for you. You have got me today. I don't know, from the beginning, I feel like I'm just, like a teary-eyed mess, but, I think that sometimes it does take big events for us to have that perspective on our life. And one of the things that you told me after, we had this conversation about Pepper and Pepper's sacrifice, and it was such a powerful statement. I think everyone should have these moments. And I would hope that it doesn't have to be, a big event for you to have those moments of introspection to understand what's important in your life and to, proactively prioritize those things. And of course, during big events, I think it brings it more to the front. But you said that your career was really important to you, but it wasn't your biggest accomplishment. And you started talking about what you thought your biggest accomplishments in life are. Can you share that with us too? Because I think it was really powerful.
Yeah, I'm going to try to not get misty-eyed with you. But, 22 years, this is all I've ever known. And if somebody were to ask, what are you most proud of? What's your biggest accomplishment? It wouldn't be the job. It wouldn't be the promotions. My greatest accomplishment and the thing that I'm most proud of is my marriage to my wife. We've been married February will be 19 years. And, you don't need to spend a lot of time looking at the statistics to know that is something that breaks the mold, not only for society, but especially for police officers. It's not easy. And so, my wife, followed closely by my children, are the things that I'm most proud of. And when I talk to new officers or recruits or, really anybody, they'll ask, how do you prioritize? How do you decide as a chief or as a police officer or what have you, where you spend your time and how you allocate your bandwidth. And I always tell them this: the greatest thing you do in life may be nothing you do, but who you raise. And if you approach it with that mindset, then it's always an easy decision for me about where I should give my time and my bandwidth. yes, it's an honor to serve in this role, but one of these days it's going to come to an end. And then the question becomes, what's left? What does that family unit look like? Yeah. What does that relationship with my wife look like? And am I going to be happy with that? Because that is life beyond public service. So I think that we have to approach every day with that in mind and make sure that we've got something left when it comes to an end. Another thing that I tell recruits is that the support system that got you here, if you're married before you went into the police academy, that person made a commitment to you before this job. And you want to make sure that that commitment remains strong after the job. And that just doesn't happen. You have to put a lot of energy and work into making sure that your relationship is a top priority. So, I can't speak for all chiefs or, all across the country, but I would sure love to see men and women in leadership positions talking about their marriage and the things that mean a lot to them outside of the profession. I think this younger generation needs to hear that it's okay to prioritize, marriage and children and faith above the job. And that's not wrong. And nobody should look down on you for that.
Yeah. I had a conversation recently where a chief said, at my funeral, I don't want you to say that I was a police officer. Like, I don't want that to be the main thing at my funeral. I want to be remembered for being a good dad, for being a good partner, for who I was. And I thought that was so powerful. And I do think that two things can exist at one time. And I think that sometimes we think that it's all or nothing one way or the other. And I think that we can strive to be the best versions of ourselves professionally. I think we can love what we do. It's very clear that you love what you do. You've said it so many times that it's a dream come true and it's an absolute honor. And all of the things that you say about your career, it's very apparent that you love that, and that can exist. But you can also be the best version of yourself for your loved ones. You can still do that. You can do both. Yes, it's challenging always to manage different areas of your life and, to wear different hats. But I think sometimes we think that it's all or nothing. And I have definitely done that in my life. I have prioritized my career and advancement over family. And it's one of my biggest regrets. I've lost family members and time with family members that I can never get back. And when you look back on the things that, at least for me, when I've sacrificed that time, the things that I sacrificed time with my family for, in the end, were really not that important. But in the moment, I thought that it was like, life can't go on without me. Like, they need me and my family can wait. And it was not true. I told myself that. And so I do think that both things can exist at one time. And, when I get to the end of this thing, I think that I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And I don't know if you just start thinking about this as you get older, kind of legacy or, how people are going to remember you. But I really just hope that they remember me for who I was and the time that they spent with me and, the relationships that I've had. And I had a conversation with someone recently that said that they were afraid to retire. They were afraid to get to the end of this because they were a stranger in their own home, that they had prioritized their career so much that they didn't know their wife or kids anymore. And they were scared to get to the end of it. And I thought that was such a devastating conversation to have. And I would imagine that a lot more people than maybe we know feel that way. If one person feels that way, then there are a lot of people who feel that way. And I kind of ask myself, like, what is the point, for me to get to the end of my life and to have had so many successes in my career, but to have nothing left in my life, And so, I believe that no matter where you are, if you are at a point in your life where you feel that way, there's always hope and movement forward. There's always an opportunity to start prioritizing those things now. Maybe you didn't do it yesterday. Maybe you haven't done it for the last 15, 20 years, but you can start today, and I don't think that it's too late to start, asking yourself, what's important to me? How do I want my life to look professionally and personally? And what are the things I can do to get there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. To the person that said that or other people who feel that way, I would say exactly what you just said. It is not too late. Mm-hmm. If you feel like you are a stranger in your own home and you don't know your wife or your children, then to me, it sounds like you need to go on a date. You need to ask her out. You need to start over and start rebuilding that. It is not too late. And there's no reason to continue feeling that way. And that's the same encouragement that we want to give to new officers, is to say, when you get to the end of your career, we don't want you to feel this way. So do these things now, the very same things that we would encourage someone who's at the end of their career and doesn't have it. We encourage you to do the same things. When I talk to recruits, one of the things I say, for those of you that are married, gentlemen, like, this is hard on your spouse. Yeah. They're probably not telling you that this is hard because they want to support you and, what have you. But man, you need to set up a date night. You need to grab some flowers and take them home and just say thank you for supporting me while I do this. And that's a lesson that everyone can take, whether you feel like you've done a good job or you got a lot of work to do. It's fine. You just have to start.
Yeah. And I think, we're so hard on ourselves, like, I think that giving ourselves grace is so important. Yeah. You might be somewhere, but you don't have to stay there.
That's right.
And you don't need motivation to take action. You need a little awareness, but maybe you're never going to feel motivated to do certain things because you feel like you're so far behind. But giving ourselves grace and then having a little bit of fire to just take that first step, and then that compounds on top. I love that you gave like a little simple example of like, sounds like you got to go on a date. It doesn't have to be like a huge thing. Like, how can we one step at a time start laying that foundation for success, whatever that looks like for you? Maybe it's having a intimate conversation where you like look your partner in the eye and you have a conversation with them and like you compliment them and you come up with a game plan, or you go on a date, or, there's little tiny things that you can do that are going to speak volumes and have a ripple effect over time. So I appreciate that little like tactical, like, just go on a date, Yeah. One of the things that you said to me, and this is really kind of in line with the same subject, is you said that you have to be okay with your life outside of the career. And you posed 3 questions. Do you remember what those questions were? Okay.
I'm going to need you to remind me.
I'll outline them. Yeah. So you said the first question, who do you do this for? Asking yourself, who do you do this for? The second one is, what is left? And then the third one is, what is next? Why are those 3 questions so important? And do you encourage people to start asking those questions early and continue throughout their career? Or when do you start introducing those concepts?
Yeah, I don't think you should step foot into the profession without considering those things. Everybody's why is different. My why was just to serve. I was raised by a man who is the epitome of a servant leader. Could do anything that he wanted, but if the trash needs to be taken out, he'll take it. If the coffee needs to be made, he'll make it. And so I've approached life following that model. So it was simply to serve, nothing more. Other people came up in awful environments. They saw the dark side of the world, of life. And they said, instead of accepting it, they said, I want to do something about it. I'm going to counter that. And I'm going to do that by serving in this way and going after those things with the hope that someone else doesn't experience things the way that I do. So everybody has to know why they're stepping into this role. The next one was what's left. Is that right?
Yep. What is left? Yeah.
So it's going to take a toll. I think of it in the same way as a professional athlete. We'll just, for the sake of example, use football. A lot of people start playing middle school, certainly high school, college, and then into the pros. And, the average professional career in the NFL is just a few years. And so everyone at some point in that journey has to know it's going to come to an end. And they should be thinking about, what's next. We, I think, are seeing a better job in sports of people considering the impact of concussions and using that to inform their exit strategy. So I'm going to do this, and it's going to do a lot of good things for my life, but it is going to take a toll. What's left when I reach the end? How much am I going to be able to give in order to do this? An analogy that I like to use are scars. So we're going to see things, experience things throughout our career that cause emotional, psychological, or maybe even physical injuries. And as long as those things are dealt with correctly, then they heal. Will there always be evidence that it exists? Sure, that's what a scar is. But if cared for properly, it can heal almost as good as new, and we can move forward. If that injury, no matter how it's inflicted or where it lives, if untreated, is where we really start to have some problems. If you broke your arm, but you never went to the doctor to get it put in a cast, will it heal? Yes. But will it heal correctly? No. It's going to heal broken. Does that mean that we can't go back and fix it? No, but it's going to take a lot more invasive work to be able to do that versus treating it and dealing with it properly right when it happened. So it's all about caring for yourself as you move through this profession. What do you want the condition of your body, of your life to be when you get to the end? What is going to be left? Are you going to be able to walk? Are you going to be able to talk? Are you going to be able to care? Are your relationships going to be intact? Is that what you want? And if so, you've got to reverse engineer that to do the things, take the time to address them as you're going through your career.
100%. My hope, and I appreciate that you compared it to physical injury, because I think that it's still hard for people to wrap their mind around emotional, mental injuries, because you can't necessarily see it. It's not tangible, right? Everyone can understand what a physical injury looks like or feels like, and the importance of doing whatever it is that you need to do to heal from that. Maybe it's physical therapy. Maybe it's, going and seeing a doctor. Maybe you need stitches or whatever that is. Like, you understand that. But I think that people are still maybe not able to grasp the concept of healing from emotional or mental injuries, because it's maybe not as, front and center. I also think that it's a little stigmatized and a little taboo still. But I really like that you said, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want to have left? What do you want to do next? And then we got to reverse it and figure out what we got to do today to make your future self happy. Yep. And one of the things that I ask people, because when we get into wellness, and, you probably have a better success rate at telling people what to do because you are in leadership. But from my experience, as an outsider kind of coming into this space, I have not had success telling people what to do. I find that people get really kind of resistant to that. The walls start to come up if I'm like, do this and don't do that. And so asking that why question has been where I find to have the most success, because I think if people can start to identify what is important to them as an individual, and you said this before, everyone's going to be different. Everyone has different perspectives on life, different experiences in life, different things that are important to them at different points in their career. Maybe for the young officer who doesn't have a family yet, their why isn't going to be their family. Their why might be service, or their why might be promotion and advancement. There's things that they want to accomplish, maybe professionally. And so it's important for them to be good physically, mentally, emotionally, to be able to serve the best that they can, versus maybe someone who is maybe at the latter half of their career, who's like, my why is my family. My why is my retirement. Like, I want to make sure that, I can crawl with my grandkids someday, and so I think that allowing everyone to identify within themselves what their why is, and then using that as their fire to take action. And I think at the core, regardless of what your why is, I think at the core, everyone wants longevity.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to be here for a while. For the most part, everyone wants to be here, whether that's having a long, successful career, or being here longer for your kids and your wife, and having a long retirement. I think like kind of at the core of everything is that longevity, and the longevity allows you to do the things that you want to do in your life. But without that longevity, like you said, if you can't walk, if you're not able to, make effective decisions anymore, if you're, in a dark place, maybe you're coping with things in unhealthy ways, then you're not able to do the things that you want to do to the best of your abilities. So
I think that's where we as police leaders need to leverage our positions to try and help and encourage. You said that sometimes in your position, you meet resistance, and, we're no different. We finally we're making progress on having officers wear vests, wear their seatbelts, doing these things that are going to keep them safe out on the street. We're doing better, but there's still a lot of resistance. And the truth is, the number one leading cause of death in police officers is heart disease. We got to change how they're caring for their bodies. Yes, they need to wear their vest. They need to wear their seatbelt, but life expectancy for police officers is, I think, 22 years less than the average. And that's the part we've got to fix. Yeah. It's not enough to talk about the gear that you need to wear so that you can accomplish your goals. We need to talk about your level of physical activity, the constant cortisol dumps that you're experiencing, what you're consuming and putting into your body. If you really want to make it to the end and you want to be as whole as you possibly can be when you get there, you have to focus on these things. And we do a decent job of talking about it. But as leaders, I don't know that we're doing enough with our action to bring about change. So it's well within our scope, and our brothers and sisters in the fire service do this a lot better than we do. But preventative screenings, cancer screenings, additional testing to give insight into what's going on inside of your body, an early warning, if you will, to our officers. For whatever reason in law enforcement, we kind of look at each other and we go, "You good?" "Oh yeah, I'm fine." And then that's it. Like that's as far as we go with it. Yeah. And I think we need to push a little bit harder on that to make sure that our officers are as whole and healthy as possible as they go through their career and once they reach retirement.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you said heart disease, because I don't think a lot of people know that. There's a lot of statistics that go around, and I still think that there's this idea that it's suicide, which I think suicide is still way too high.
Of course.
But, there's so much science and data coming out right now about cardiovascular health. And one of the statistics I saw, and I've talked about this before because it threw me out of my chair when I saw this, it said that sedentary lifestyle, so sitting for, I think it said 8 hours or more a day, right? And think about how long we sit, whether that's someone in their patrol vehicle, you go home, you sit maybe at the dinner table to eat, you're driving, you're sitting, you're on the couch, you're sitting. We spend a lot of our day sitting. Yeah. And it said that it increases your risk of cardiac arrest by 147%. I was like, we got and so when we start to understand these things, when there's awareness around certain challenges or things that are happening currently, then it's the responsibility for us to have more education around that. And then what are those tools and resources to take action? And I've talked about this before, and maybe this is just my opinion, but I think that we're kind of stuck in this education area. I think that there's already awareness around a lot of these things. And there's a lot of conversations about what are those tools and resources that can help. But then the action phase, which is the most important, the implementation phase, is kind of where we're stuck. We haven't really transitioned from the education to the action. And without action, there's no progress, right? And I always think about this analogy of like cotton candy, right? Like talking about things is great. It's kind of like cotton candy. Like it looks really pretty. It looks like really full. You want to kind of grab onto it. Everyone's excited about it. But then like when you like dive into it, it kind of disintegrates. There's nothing there. There's no substance. And so like education and talking about it is great. But the action is where the substance comes in. That's where like you're digging your teeth into it and you're really starting to see progress. And you and I talked about this a little bit, and you said that you really care about the future of this profession. And you talked about the responsibility that leaders have to teach people and to provide these resources. And you kind of ask the question of what does action really look like on a day-to-day basis? And I was hoping you could give your insights on one, what do you think is the responsibility of leadership, and what do you think action, on a consistent basis looks like?
As far as the profession is concerned, we have to leave it better than we found it. Every one of us who has the opportunity to sit in the chief's seat has a responsibility to make our organizations, our communities, our officers better. And I would remind those that are in, chief executive positions, like you are not the chief. You're not the chief executive. You are sitting in that seat. You are occupying that position for a period of time. But as soon as you go, it gets filled. It stays with the organization. You're serving in that role temporarily, and that can't be your identity. Every police department has a chief, and they all change. So you're a steward. You are there temporarily. And so how are you going to shepherd that flock while you're in charge, while you're on watch? And each one of us who are in these positions has a unique opportunity to bring new, innovative, life-changing things into the fold. When you're the ultimate decision maker, you control how the resources are used, then you have an opportunity to affect change. So, my encouragement to chiefs out there is to leverage that position of stewardship for the betterment of the officers and then subsequently the community. I agree with a lot of leaders out there who would say, if you take care of your officers, they're going to take care of the community. So as a chief, my number one job is to make sure that my officers are whole, well taken care of, well supported. And if I do that, they are going to carry out the department's mission and serve the community well. But like I said about being a steward of resources, we build the budget in coordination with the city. And while we may want this latest, greatest, whatever, that costs $1 million, we also have the ability to propose routine blood work and cancer screenings for our employees. And we owe it to them to pause and say, what's most important? Do we need this big piece of equipment? Or how many of these officers on my team will I be okay burying within the next decade? And the answer should be none. I should do everything in my power while I occupy this position and I control the resources and how they're used. I should leverage them to benefit the people who are on my team. Now, I'm not saying we need to neglect the things that we need to do our job and all that. And I recognize that everybody's bucket of resources is different. And so what one chief or one community is going to be able to do for their officers is going to be different than the next. But to your point, it's got to be more than lip service. Just do something. When Jason Garrett was the head coach of the Cowboys, he had this saying on the wall that said, you get what you demand, you encourage what you tolerate. Mm-hmm. And so as police leaders, what are we demanding from our employees? And I'm not saying we're going to beat them into submission and make them go to the gym, but we can make them submit to a blood test to help them understand whether or not they're at a high risk of a heart attack. Which we know the job that they go out and do has a propensity to create. You're sedentary, you got to hop out, chase a bad guy. That's a lot of strain on your heart. You deserve to know if you're at risk so that you can do something about it for yourself and for your family. And I think we need to do a better job of being a good steward for our people.
I love it. What can you say that saying one more time, the cowboy saying?
Yeah, you get what you demand, you encourage what you tolerate.
I love that.
Yeah.
I did you watch, this is so off topic, but did you watch the Cowboys documentary?
I think that we are a few episodes in.
Okay.
I have 5 kids, and so there's a lot of demand for what we turn on at night, but we have gotten a few episodes in there.
Yeah, I draw a lot of parallels between law enforcement and professional athleticism, and I know you've drawn a few of those parallels today. And in watching some of these documentaries, I can see the carryover there with the mindset, with needing to operate at a really high physical and mental level, and the teamwork that it takes to do that. And I think that the more we can start drawing those parallels, because I think that sometimes people forget, how elite you are and what is required to keep you there. Because if you look at some of these documentaries, and there's a ton on Netflix, it's not just the Cowboys one, but there's other ones for receiver and quarterback, and there's some basketball ones, and you see the level of not just working out that they do. They're also focusing on hand-eye coordination. They're also focusing on tactical breathing so that they can make effective decisions under pressure. They're also focusing on rest and recovery. That is something that is hugely important for them. You see LeBron, and he's sitting there in a cryo chamber, resting and massages, all the things that they do. And they are also constantly getting blood work, doing different things to see where are they and where are their, I'm going to put this in quotes, but where are their weaknesses? Mm-hmm. You can't improve yourself if you don't understand where your weaknesses are. And so to your point, how can we be proactive? How can we start implementing little things over time? And how can we start having greater awareness of, where are our room, or where is the room for improvement within ourselves, so that we can then start taking action?
Yeah. And I think, professional athletes, take a lot of that responsibility on themselves because they are the commodity. They're the asset. And so it's in their best interest to pay attention to those things and ensure that they're able to perform at a high level. The incentive for government workers like us is a little bit different. And that's where I love the comparison between the chief and the head coach. Yeah. And so if the coach sees in the game that the team is really tired and dragging in the third quarter, what are they going to do? When they get back to practice next week, they're going to focus on strength and conditioning. We are tired in the third quarter and we need to have maximum energy through the fourth. What are we going to do? We got to train. We got to work. Is that fun or enjoyable? No. These guys are going to gripe and complain as they're running in practice. But that is far better than the pain or embarrassment of defeat on the field. And so I think that's where we need to step in and say, hey, you may not like this. You may not enjoy this, but I care about you. I care about the team. I want you to be successful on the field when you hit the street to go do your job. And so I'm going to ask you to do these things so that you can perform well.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that builds confidence and it builds morale when everyone is held to that high standard and you're working together as a team and you're improving yourself and you feel like you are more advanced in your craft. I think that is also wellness. I think that forward trajectory is wellness. The challenge is this in the stagnation.
Yep. And I also think, as you mentioned, when you are more advanced, when you are more comfortable with your craft, I think the cortisol dump is a lot less. Mm-hmm. So when you're stepping out into a situation where you have a level of confidence that you can handle it, you just get out and you go handle business. But if you get out and you are deathly afraid because you're underprepared, that's a different dump. That's a different strain on your body. So don't all of our officers deserve to be prepared at a level where they get out with confidence that they can tackle that situation as opposed to dread?
Yeah, 100%. I've loved this conversation and I've appreciated your time so much. My final question for you, and I know you've already given so many little nuggets and words of wisdom as we've gone along, but what words of wisdom would you share with the younger officer? Someone who's earlier in their career, maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Yep. The single biggest piece of advice that I have for younger officers is you don't have to change who you are to be a part of this profession. We need everybody from all different backgrounds and walks of life, experiences and reasons for serving. The police subculture is a very powerful thing and it's a very good thing in a lot of ways. But one of the ways where it's not so great is getting everybody to conform and kind of fit into this single mold. And as someone who was placed into the mold, who voluntarily put myself there, and then who came back out, I would just say we need you as you are. Your views, the things that make you special, we need those. You don't need to become something else. So you're going to serve around a lot of police officers and you're going to identify some commonalities and some consistencies. But if that's contrary to who you are, you don't have to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on here. And
thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, of course. And we'll stay in touch for sure. And I just wish you and your organization and your family all the best. So thank you.
Thank you very much.